Hello, bold ones, and welcome to the 9th episode of Act Bold. Today on the podcast, I have Australian casting duo Robyn Gibbes and Greg Apps. I've personally taken workshops with Greg, and Greg has cast, they both have cast, a number of major films and television series. But Greg, I know Greg because he is most well known for me for making self-tapes stand out. So that has been an amazing journey for myself, and I know quite a lot of actors that I know as well, so I can't wait to get into it with them. Hello, Greg and Robyn. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi there, Anne. Thank you.
Hi there. So nice of you to come on, and in the evening, I can see it's dark behind you.
It's black.
Yeah. Greg, this is the first time I'm actually meeting you, Robyn. It's a pleasure to meet you, but I've, of course, been hearing about you for years, as long as I've known Greg. And I'm trying to think, Greg, I think I did the first workshop with you, what was that? Maybe it was well before COVID. So it was probably 6 years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say 5 years ago.
Yeah, would be.
Yeah. So I would love to hear, because you have been on the cutting edge of self-taping. So what have been the biggest changes for you from the beginning of self-taping to self-taping today? If there are any changes, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely changes.
Oh, yeah. So the thing is, I remember years ago, self-taping was only because you'd want an actor to come into the room and audition for you, and they said, "Oh, look, I'm not in town at the moment. I'm out of town. Can I do a tape myself and send it?" And yeah, sure. But what happened was, and the changes for me is the fact that sort of actors started in self-taping, and what they tried to do was to copy the kind of the studio space, to do exactly what sort of the setup is and the kind of the understanding is of the studio space. But I'm at pains to explain to everybody the studio space is my creative space, is the casting director's space, because it allows me to see a lot of actors really fast. They walk in, they stand on the mark, they take an eye line to the reader, and they do their bit. And if you recreate that, you are recreating what I think is a sterile creative space. Whereas the self-tape space there's freedom. There's freedom in the space if you take it.
The reason why we started, and we actually started, oh gosh, when did we start? Years ago. We probably started about 10 years ago, and way before self-taping was even a term. I remember actually putting it out there on social media. I don't think Instagram was around. I think it was just Facebook, and asking people, what do you think of the term self-taping? And so many actors came back and said, oh, it's it's not something that will catch on. No one would do it. Why would you do it?
Famous last
not
words,
good for
right?
actors. It makes casting directors lazy. It was just so negative the entire time, but we pushed on. And the reason why we pushed on was because we saw so many fabulous actors, great actors, come into our space and just fail in the audition process. It made our job really hard, because here we were trying to convince our director-producer team that you really need to look at this person because they'll be fabulous for the character, but they failed in the audition process. So we figured there's got to be another way, and that's why we started self-taping, or self-testing, if you like.
So you felt like it was just the pressure of the actor coming into the casting director's space. And I know you guys have discovered some major talent. Russell Crowe, Eric Bana, Guy Pearce, just to name a few. It's mind-boggling. So you think that it was just the pressure of coming in, but you two are so nice. Why? I would love that, to be able to get the immediate feedback.
The biggest problem for an actor is the waiting room. You sit in the waiting room, and I remember from my days as an actor going back to the 70s, you sit there and you look across the room, and there's someone, and you go, oh my God.
Perfect for the role.
I thought you were overseas. I thought I was going to book this job because you weren't here. Oh no. Yeah. And that's before you went into the room.
I love self-taping. I think that there are advantages and disadvantages to both. But self-taping is here to stay. So I think actors need to get used to it. And it really opens up our opportunities. Who was that Australian kid who got cast in Stranger Things? Dacre Montgomery? I think it was.
Montgomery, yeah.
Do you know? Yeah. Off a self-tape. which was amazing. And I loved his self-tape. I know I've gotten mixed. I think you get as many opinions and feedback as there are casting directors, but personally, I loved it. I thought it really stood out. He was really, you could see he was having fun. That was like a big thing to me. And that's something for me often, it can be difficult. Go ahead, Robyn.
I was going to say, and the big thing I think is the fact that he stood out. He was different.
Yes.
And I think when you're in
did.
front of the casting director, in the casting director's space, it's very easy to conform. It's very easy for the casting director to have their fixed idea on the way this screen test should go. And so they put that onto the actor, and it's I'm not blaming the casting director, that's just what happens. I understand why it happens. But therefore, it's difficult for actors to do something different in that space.
I think the analogy for me is it's a bit like having guests for dinner. If you go to somebody's place, it's their space, you've got to conform and be polite, and you can't choose where to sit or anything like that. But when you have a dinner party yourself, it's like, who wants a drink? Who wants this? Who wants that? Suddenly it's your space, and you actually fill the room with your energy, with your kind of choices.
Yeah. I love that. And I love the analogy of having guests over. And I think sometimes this can be what's missing in a self-tape. So maybe you have some advice for that. Because there's often, I'm doing it with someone who's on a Zoom with me, or sometimes even just reading against myself. Like I've pre-taped the lines if I can't get anyone on short notice to do it. So what's missing is that energy, that like, here we are, let's do it, let's have fun, because it's just me. So I don't know. Do you have any suggestions about that? How can you make that a little bit more dynamic?
What you've got to do is, because I think actors prioritize the page, prioritize the dialogue. And let's face it, as an actor, what you do is you look at the 6 takes you've done and you immediately reject the ones where you fluffed the lines. No, I believe
true. Yeah.
So in terms of that, I think what you do is if you've got 6 takes, the first thing to do is to take the 4 slowest ones and get rid of them. And now just choose out of the 2 fastest ones. And choose from that, because they're the ones with the energy. But I think what you need to be doing is to create this environment that is yours. It's entertaining. You are entertaining somebody. You are entertaining the person you're talking to. You're having fun with them. You're trying to make them laugh. You're trying to engage with them. And if you have that as the priority instead of the page, if you have that as the kind of the point of focus rather than getting this scene, then you're in a territory. So to that extent, the reader is superfluous. We've cast people where there was no reader. We've cast,
That said, for an actor, it's really difficult because Greg's saying you're entertaining them. You're entertaining a cold camera. It's all very well to say you're entertaining them.
And you also want to be authentic, right?
Yeah.
So it's not, if you're like putting it on for the camera, then it's not really being authentic. It's being like put on. So it's like finding that sort of way to bring that out of you and have fun with it. I guess just play really is what it comes down to. So I'm curious about the lines, because that is something that yes, we actors get very caught up in. Oh shit, I just messed up the line, let's start over, blah blah blah, even when it's feeling great. So you're saying that doesn't matter at all? Or are
no, I can't say that.
Not at all.
Okay.
Nice if we could, but no, we can't say that.
It's about taking freedom.
Okay.
It's about taking freedom, which doesn't mean you change the lines, doesn't mean you don't say the lines. It's just that there's beats and rhythms that are yours, that are your choices. And that's driven by the relationship you have. For instance, I've been in the studio going back, and if somebody is doing a TV commercial as a presenter, you change and so often, especially as a presenter, you stand in front of camera and now you feel like you're talking to an audience, talking to a large auditorium. And I changed it by saying, hey, talk to your mum. Explain it to your mum. Yeah. And suddenly they become warmer, they become gentler, they talk to one person. And that's just an example of how it's about who you're relating to, who the relationship you've got is, and that's something that you manufacture. It doesn't have to be what the page dictates.
Greg's one of Greg's many tips is read the lines. Is you have an excitement when a script comes in, when the sides come in, and you read it. And his tip is you read it once, you read it twice, you read it 3 times, and then you put it down. And then you go away and you put yourself in a completely different environment. Just let it go through your head. Think about the character. Put yourself in your own space. Don't have distractions. Put yourself in your own space, cup of coffee, a drink, whatever it might be, and just think about that character and let it mold, let it mold, let it mold. And think about someone who would be absolutely perfect for that role. Think about that famous actor or actress, whoever it might be. You're not copying them. You're imagining what qualities they would bring to that character, and then try to bring that through into the lines. And it's amazing how the lines come, because you now have a really good understanding of the character.
If you think of Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, he took, and it's iambic pentameter, it's the classic, you don't get much more structured and classic than that. But in those opening sequences, it's all about street gangs. It's all about street gangs and guns, and that energy, that dynamic that he put in the frame, that he put on the screen. We were there. We were with street gangs in LA kind of thing. It was that, which is a combination of the production design, because Catherine Martin, his partner and production designer, just creates a community that sort of we've never seen before in every one of his films. But that also, he dressed the actors in loud Hawaiian shirts and gave them guns and gave them skateboards and put Ray-Bans on and things like that. They became a character before the dialogue, not because of the dialogue. Yeah. They became a character and had an energy, not because of the dialogue. They had it because of the setting, because of the location, because of the relationships. Yeah. And now you start with the dialogue.
Relationships.
Yeah, I love that. Is key, you know? Yeah. So I've heard more and more that the boring gray or blue backdrop is not being used so much. And well, I think I know what you're going to say about this, but I would love to hear what you're going to say about this.
The point of focus has to be the character.
We're delighted the boring grey or blue are not being used so much.
Look, it's more a bit like the kind of the actors that reject a take because they get the dialogue wrong. It's like, and now suddenly, and actors also, there's so many drama teachers and agents say, we can't use that because it's not a plain background. The reason why is because in the early days of self-taping, we would get tapes from actors and the actor didn't understand who was watching the tape.
Who the audience was. And so therefore they were doing a great performance. It's almost, you think of when you've seen a video of a stage play. You have no connection with the characters.
Yeah, they're just too far away. They're just too small and far removed. Yeah.
And they're also doing a performance for a kind of an auditorium rather than the intimacy. See, because we believe that sort of, and I'm moving around all the time, and I'm doing that because I'm that kind of guy, but also because of the fact that I'm trying to fill the frame, because it's like when you move in, suddenly you've changed I've changed the intimacy of the character, of the relationship.
Yeah.
By virtually just leaning forward. And it's that freedom that an actor has, but it's also that understanding of how to take ownership of the frame. But by doing so, you can have any backdrop you like, provided the sound is good, the light is good, and that the kind of the character dominates the frame.
And also provided it feeds the character. So if you have something distracting in the background, it's going to distract. As long as it feeds the character, the background feeds the character, then it's great. It's fabulous, much better background.
So if you were doing like what you were saying before, maybe an urban character, maybe against a brick wall or a cement wall or something like that.
Exactly.
Or a farmer, you could be with a horse in the background. I don't know. Although that would probably pull a lot of focus. Yeah. But yeah, it's good to know. So it's understanding our skills are always being upped, right? In what it's no longer just about acting, right? We also have to know how to market ourselves, how to do our own productions, it's all of it. It's all in there.
It is.
And you just have to be so savvy and so allow yourself the creative freedom to other areas of your business, because acting obviously is a business, that you would allow yourself within the role. And definitely allow yourself within the role. Somebody had said something to me recently, and I thought it was so good. It really helped me to approach castings with a different attitude, approach auditions with a different attitude, because I think so many actors will go into an audition and they either feel like it's a win-lose situation, you either get it or you don't, and some will go in there with the attitude of, I'd like to win the room. We hear that a lot. But what I recently heard, and for me it really helped, was that you're still part of the production, in the sense that if you can bring your true essence to the casting, then, and they don't need that. That's not what they're looking for in this character. At least you've helped them, the casting directors, to say, okay, we actually don't want this energy. So that helps us with that. But that energy, because somebody was authentic and brought their real self to it, that energy could be used maybe in another, because you're always doing more than one thing at a time anyway. So I know the two of you talk a lot about, I think when I took your course, Greg, it was, what was it, alpha and beta characters. And I don't think you were doing the omega character back then. But now you are doing that. Do you want to talk about that at all? Or
talk about the kind of the main thing to decide, and you decide this before you prepare the scene, is the status of the characters. And the alpha, beta, and omega, don't Google it because it'll be different to what I say. I'm just using those as words. You call them A, B, and C.
But it comes back to relationships.
Okay.
It all comes back to relationships.
Yeah. And if you're talking to your boss, it's a different rhythm, a different body language, a different everything to if you're talking to an apprentice.
Or your mother.
And that's where you start. You start with the status of the character, and then you build from that.
I know it makes such a big difference, because when I took that workshop, it was just, you could see this immense change in energy from going from an alpha to a beta character, being a high status to a low status character. And I don't remember doing the omega, but that was several years ago. I don't know. Were you doing it at the very beginning?
Yep.
One of the exercises we have is to give the actor a scene and say, okay, do a version that's alpha, do a version that's beta, and do a version that's omega. So high status, mid status, low status, to show that you can take the same dialogue and you can create a different status for the character, a different relationship between the two characters based on your choice. Not on what the writers provided you, but based on the choice you make as an actor.
People say, I've seen many acting classes, dramaturgs say that it's all about the tone in the voice, which it is. But it's a lot more than that. It's about status and it's about the character. It's about where you fit in the scene and how you fit, what level you fit in the scene.
Yeah. The energy, right? Because your energy is different if you're high status, low status, or regular status, I guess, eye level, right? Yeah. So what about, how do you feel about props and costumes?
I
don't mind.
I think props can be great. Absolutely fantastic. Okay? But I'm just saying that.
Greg is holding a knife for those of you who are listening.
But if you don't agree with me,
a big knife.
I've got something to say.
I don't mind props so much. However, when actors, very often when they use props, the prop becomes the centre of attention. And so it distracts from the performance. It's a bit like an accent. I don't mind an accent if it's used wisely and used well. And it's the same as a prop.
As Robbie said, an accent and also a prop, where the problem is suddenly the scene becomes about the prop or the accent. No, it's the character. Yeah. Or, and again, as you were talking about before, about not having a plain background, or the scene is about the background. It's always the character. And the character is built from the relationship. So it's that, that's the foundation. And now start to prepare the scene. Now start to bring your kind of performance technique into play. Get the idea right first before you start introducing the execution of that concept.
Hence, going back to my original, what I said originally about Greg's tips, read it once, twice, 3 times, drop it, leave it alone, go away, think about it, find quiet time, think about it, work it through, and then think about the execution and how you're going to do it and how you're going to stage it and props, etc.
I love that. What do you think are the qualities? Is there a common thread when actors audition that you say, wow, that's fantastic, or wow, that sucks? What are the common threads in those two scenarios?
You answer that.
I can't. I don't know how.
That's on you, babe.
It's
there you go.
It's an innate quality.
Taking a few steps back.
We were just casting for a film a couple of weeks ago, and the director, it was a very difficult film to cast because it started as a 19-year-old, then a 35-year-old, and then a 55-year-old. So we had to find 3 different actors, or find one actor to play all 3 ages. So it was difficult, and the director couldn't make up his mind, and understandably, but we saw so many actors, and coming back to your question, really the actors that stood out, just, I don't know why they just did. They did exactly the same lines,
okay,
but they just found something different. They found something different.
So maybe they surprised you? Did they surprise you in some way, or?
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's what different is when I say different. It's because it's not what you're expecting. It's something different to what anyone else has done, different to what we had thought we might see. It was just different.
Do you think that boils down to someone giving themselves the freedom to make choices based on who they are under the given circumstances?
Absolutely. What it boils down to, you absolutely touched on it. It boils down to confidence. Knowing who they are and feeling absolutely confident in who they are and what they're going to do.
Yeah, because it's really the only way to be original, right? Is if you bring yourself, because there's only one you. Yeah,
and really in many ways, it doesn't matter what they do as long as they are the character. That's all we're just looking for, the character. And if someone can show us something that stands out and is memorable, it makes us go, we might have seen 1,000 people for that one role, but we will remember that person that stood out. So we'll put him on the short list. So when we're presenting to our client, our director producer, that short list being however many, 3 or 5 people out of however many we saw, they stand out and they're the ones that we push to our client.
I'd love the people who are listening, watching, to keep in mind as well who's watching. And it's the audition audience, it's the casting director, and how the digital age has changed things, that the director themselves can go off and send out a breakdown online to as many people and just say, send me a self-tape, and wade through 1,000, 2,000 tapes. So the fact is, in terms of what I have to do to deliver my creativity, our sort of imagination, is we've got to put versions of the character there that are different from necessarily the scripted version of the character. It's not to say, again, we've got to keep in mind the character. One of the things we'll talk about is the fact of what are the 2 most important... the question I ask, I was asked by a graduating drama school. They said, and I said, have you got any questions? And they said, and somebody put their hand up and said, yeah, when they say, have you got any questions in the audition, what do you ask? And I said, oh.
That's a good question.
It's a good question. And I said, okay, I came up with an answer that I still actually think was a good answer, which is, what's the most important quality you're looking for in this character? And what that means is now immediately before the audition, warm or arrogant or whatever the word is. Yeah, but give yourself that word. Give yourself that word. Give yourself that word.
I love that. Yeah. That really gives you something to hold on to and move with.
But now suddenly also, you're not focused on what the next line is. You're focused on the warmth, the arrogance, whatever word it is you've given yourself.
Yeah. Oh, I've got a big audition tomorrow in the studio, actually, not a self-tape, and I'm going to take that one with me. That's great advice. I love that.
One more tip on that is make sure just before you do the take that you say to them, I think this character's arrogant. And now you've actually planted the seed in their brain. And when they get to the end of the day, they're going to say, who was the girl in red, the one that was arrogant? You've given yourself an identity. And it's that way of taking ownership of a niche, of a version of the character that's yours.
If she's arrogant.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you've got to pull it off. Yeah, you've got to make it.
If she's arrogant. I can definitely pull that one off.
Don't forget that.
So that's an interesting question because, for instance, this audition tomorrow has 3 different scenes, and one is she definitely is arrogant, but there's another one where she's really a warm mother, and then there's another one where she's doing something else where I think she's feeling very confident in her role in the situation that she's in, but she's trying to be very sympathetic, very likable. So she wouldn't be coming across as arrogant. So what do you, because the energies, it's still the same person, right? What do you suggest that sort of saying something before each scene? Because obviously you have a little break between scenes before you go on. Or is it just an overall characteristics that you mentioned?
I wouldn't think so. No, we disagree on that.
We disagree on that, so it depends who you're asking there.
Okay.
Please, tell us how you went. Tell us what choice you made and how you went.
What is? I guess what you have to think about that in that situation is what is the underlying emotion there? Is she cold or is she warm? When you say she's arrogant, is she cold? When you say she is a mother and she's sympathetic, is she cold or is she warm in that?
And the thing
and bring that as an underlying thing.
Yeah.
The thing is too, Anne, as all actors, what we do is we just connect to the page. And we think the clues are on the page. You've just identified an arrogant character, a warm character, a maternal character. Go and look at think of the great maternal characters and go and look at the film. Think of the great arrogant character.
That's your homework as actors.
Yeah.
That's the
homework.
Yeah.
For your arrogant character, somebody that's naturally authoritative, go and look at Meryl Streep in Devil Wears Prada.
I'm also a screenwriter, and I think as screenwriters, we're always I meet with a group once a week, and they're fantastic. And one of the things we always talk about are what are the comps for this? What are the comps, like when we read each other's scripts, what are the comps? And I think it's a super interesting concept to take into acting. What are the comps for this role?
What's the comps?
Okay, so the comparables. You're both sort of like, okay. It's what are the comparable scripts or what are the comparable TV shows or films, the comparisons, right?
Yes,
if they say, I don't know, this is a mix of The Shape of Water and The MASH. Okay, so what is that? So taking those two things and
totally.
But I think it's interesting to do that as well with a character that I I've never thought of it in those terms, but I think it's a very interesting thing to do, to say, okay, it's this, and of course me, right? I can only bring what I can bring. You're not like the best.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You're not emulating, as I said earlier, you're not emulating, but you're taking the qualities that actor, actress brought to the role of whatever it might be. If it is Meryl Streep in Devil Wears Prada or whatever it might be, what are the qualities that she brought to that role, and how does that work for this character that you're playing?
I was going to say, as actors, you're supposed to go into the community and look at people and study them and look at their body language and the qualities that make them who they are and the status that they have between different people. But to do it to another character in another project almost makes us feel like we're plagiarizing that performance. No, you're not. You're using it for inspiration.
It's research.
I love that. And honestly, I had never thought of it in those terms before. And maybe just because I am also a screenwriter, it helped me to make that connection. But it does make perfect sense to just use it as research and inspiration. Yeah.
Well, as a writer, you have an actor's photograph above your wall, because that's your inspiration, and that's how you write that character, and how that character has a different voice to every other character, because you've got the visual reference for the character, and that's what we're doing, but what we're suggesting.
To just have it there in the background, and then it stays with you no matter what, if you're using that as part of your research and part of your preparation. Yeah, I love that. What do you think that what are the misconceptions about that actors have going into a self-tape situation or an audition situation?
Have to be good.
Either one.
Or I'll say an audition or a self-tape situation, and that is actors believe that they have to get the role. I'm going in there to get the role, to win the role, which should not be the attitude at all. I think that's crazy, because you've already won. You've got the audition. The reason why that casting director has asked you to self-tape or audition is because they believe you are right for the role. So you've won. It's a win. Now you bring your craft to that space, to that audition, to that self-tape, and you prove to that casting director that they were right. They were absolutely right. I can do this. I am right for this. And this is how I'll show you what I intrinsically can bring to that role, because you were right. So it's a win. And I think most actors forget that it's a win, but also they forget that they're going in there for one thing and one thing only, and that is not to be the best person for the role, but to be memorable. If they can do something that stands out, Stranger Things, Dacre Montgomery, he did something different. He stood out, so he was remembered. If you can do something different, be memorable.
There's a saying, dance like no one's watching. And I always suggest you should audition like you've already got the part. Because if you do that, now suddenly there are no parameters, there are no rules, you'll do whatever you want to do. And I've got to say, over the years, the actors that have really impressed in the space are the ones that sort of have had a feeling that sort of, this is a workshop and I'm feeling my way for the character. Whereas so many drama teachers teach you to make hard decisions, firm decisions, and you want to do that because that actually takes the variables out of your time in the room. Now, keep the variables in the room are good, where you're still exploring and experimenting. They say the American thing is always hold the sides in your hand so it doesn't look like that's your final performance.
And always look at the room.
And I'm saying, but carry that forward to the character and going, I'm not sure how it's just, and you're feeling your way. And that actually is because we cast the actor who we think is going to collaborate with the director. The director is attracted to somebody who they want to work with, not the person who just comes in and just does it. And
he's also feeling his way.
Yeah, because the director's feeling his way about the character. So to explore that character together with this performer is a really good thing. As I say, audition like you've already got the part.
I love that. I love that. So now when you are viewing like 1,000 actors, and I'm sure that of that 1,000, maybe 10% are amazing, but that's still 100 actors. So how are you, how are you going, okay, number 97, number 231, and number 776, those are the ones, or are you just making notes all along and rearranging the whole time? How does that work?
Well, we have to present to the producer half a dozen. If the character is a doctor who is Caucasian and 45 and male and wears glasses and has grey hair, how dull would it be if that was all that was on the tape? If that's what we presented, because we don't have to present 20, 30 of those people. We can present 6 or 8 of those people, and now I want to experiment and I want to give them a female who's also has a hijab, a kind of, it's different ways of perceiving the character. And that's the exploration. That's what I'm doing in my creative space. I'm exploring versions of the character.
No, that's helpful.
And being left of field, going left of field. And that's what we're looking for with the actors. We're asking them, wanting them to be left of field. So they're not we expect.
Just basically have fun, right? That's what it boils down to. Know what you're doing, do your research, do your prep, and then just let it go and have fun.
And then just let it go,
I think we've also got to, as actors, we've also got to understand the kind of the project. What is the end result? What is the community we're feeding into? If you're going for daytime TV for a soap opera, everybody's good looking, but also, and more importantly, or maybe a role that's only got a couple of lines, you need to be the type, because that person, that character is judged in a moment. Or in the case of soap opera, you serve the character up on a platter because you're actually delivering to, I'll call it the lowest common denominator. But now, look at these weird shows. Look at these weird characters.
Exactly.
And we've never seen communities like this before. You can't just drop an actor into the middle of that is a good actor and a good technically skilled actor and all that kind of thing. You've got to drop somebody in there that we go, where did they find him? True Detective is a great series that I was constantly amazed by where they found the actors, and then also that performance by Matthew McConaughey in the first series of True Detective, where he played the 2 different versions of a cop. It's when he played the long-haired guy that was just sat there and made little figurines out of beer cans. That was just a fascinating study of a character, and it draws us in. He didn't serve the character up on a platter, and he draws the audience in. I've got another analogy. Whereas that for soap opera, we sit back in our seat because it's like we don't have to work. As the audience, we don't have to engage. We don't have to work.
Sure. You can be making dinner, vacuuming, all of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Whereas for an audience in Netflix and sort of a major drama, you need them to sit forward in their chair because they've got to concentrate on what this performance is, on what this character is, on where we're going. And it makes it engages the audience. It's almost, in soap opera, the audience is one step ahead of the plot. In true drama, the audience is one step behind, trying to keep up. We use the most used appliance in our house is the remote control. Because we're going backwards to go, what did they say? Right. Hang on a second.
This has been so wonderful. We're coming up on an hour. Is there anything that you would like the actors to know specifically? Like, is there anything that we haven't covered that we should be covering?
I think the only thing I'd like to reiterate is be adventurous. Just be adventurous. Just go for it. Do your homework. Do your research. Take those 3 tips that Greg said, as in read it, go away, think about it, and then think about who she would be if you had the choice of whoever to cast in that role. And don't copy that person. Just think about the qualities that person would bring to the role. And just be adventurous. Be adventurous.
I love that. I love that. So how can people get a hold of you? I know there's the audition technique, which is your workshop, which teaches the self-tape technique. Where else can people find you? Or what? First, maybe give us I'll put that in the show notes anyway, but just maybe say it for people who are too lazy, I don't know, to do their preparation and homework.
In terms of how we help actors, that's through the audition technique. Our casting site, our casting presence, Greg App's casting, that's more a kind of communication and engagement with producers and directors. But for actors, it's the audition technique.
Yeah. And we have various different courses and things that we do one-on-ones, as in if you've got an audition coming up and you want to run it through, or your latest show reel or whatever. So we do that sort of thing. And I don't know, we've got various things. We're not good at marketing. We're not good at talking about.
But you are on Facebook. I know you are on Facebook. You're good. You're great at talking. And I know you're also on Facebook, and that's the audition technique, right? On Facebook
and Instagram. Insta,
and Instagram as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. This has been so informative and so much fun, actually. More importantly.
Yeah, for us too.
Good. Thank you all so much to you for watching and being a part of Act Bold this time. If you like this episode, make sure to give a shout out to Greg and Robyn on Instagram. You can tag them, take a screenshot, tag them, let them know you're watching. And I will also share out your stories on my stories if you tag me as well at Ann Alexander Cedar. And that's it for now. Stay your bold and beautiful self.